Hello. This week is our phase 2 week of the inquiry project, but please don't feel like you need to be in phase 2 because I don't expect anybody to be in phase 2. If you're even coming up with a topic this week, I will be thrilled. It's just I'm going to cover it phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then you have many weeks to work on this with the children in the classroom. And just wanted you to know, I don't expect you to be in phase 2. Okay. So chapter 3 of Hellman Katz is just chock full of great information about developing your project. They talk about revisiting your web. And, this is the web that you post on your phase 1 page on a phase 1 side of the documentation panel. And it's also what you put into your journal. But if you haven't put together your web, don't worry, it's not due or anything like that right now. So I added actually to week 6 on Blackboard, I added a link to the Oklahoma Academic Standards. So you could look those up because you will be wanting to include some of them on your anticipatory web. So that'll just make it easier for you. Remember that you need a minimum of, you need 10 questions or more. If the children don't have at least 10 questions on the topic that they and you selected together, then it's probably not a topic that lends itself to a lot of rich inquiry. So keep that in mind. How many questions can you come up with? Because these questions are what is going to fuel the inquiry. This is what they're going to do all the work on to answer their own questions with your assistance, of course. So you're going to move into the phase of investigation. You may need to involve parents. On page 34 of Hellman Katz, they talk about involving parents. You might send a little note home asking them for some supplies that may, be needed. You might also ask parents if if they're going to be a visiting expert, perhaps, for whatever the topic is that was selected. That would be great. As much involvement as you can get with families, that's always wonderful. The other thing you're going to look at is what artifacts are you able to bring in? If you haven't nailed your topic down, then think about some possible topics and bring in some artifacts, some items that might stimulate some interest in the children. Let's see what else you need to do here. Topics may change. Children may start out in one direction and wind up in a completely different direction as they move through the inquiry project. Not unusual, and that's totally fine. Just follow where they lead. You might select a field site. There's only a limit as to where you can take children. So that also limits your topics. If your field site is within walking distance, fantastic. If it's somewhere around the school, even better, easy to get to. Make sure you have someone that can be a visiting expert if you cannot do field site visits. Experiences are important. Preparing for investigation on page 36 is very detailed, gives you a great deal of great information. Use the experts, obviously, for resources. Let the children find out the answers for themselves. You may have to pre-teach some skills to your young investigators. You may actually have to teach them what a question is. You may have to teach them how to draw certain things that they want to record. You may have to teach them how to tally if some of what they're doing means they have to count. So you may have to do that pre-teaching of skills. You may have to show them how to use whatever equipment they're going to need to record. Maybe they're taking pictures with a camera. Maybe they're using some construction paper and some tools to create something. So you may have to work with them. That you might provide clay again, that may be something that you need to help them learn how to use. Please know that Play-Doh and things like that are toys. They're not appropriate investigation tools. Then in chapter 4, they are all about investigations and about even bringing in new questions as you are doing a field visit. Record those and add them to the old questions, all good. Make sure visits are active visits and they get to ask lots of questions and interact with materials as much as possible. I love on page 43, it says teachers are cautioned to resist the temptation to over-program visits. And that's so important because as teachers, we like to have our agenda and we've got everything down to the last second, but sometimes it's nice to let the children lead this a little bit. See where it takes them. Okay, let's turn this page here. They talk about on-site sketching. If you do make a field visit, make sure that you have an opportunity for children to record what they're seeing, maybe some clipboards and pencils for them to use so that it can be an in-the-moment recording. They're really explanatory on that in page 44 and 45 of Hellman Katz. And they talk about debriefing when you come back, because it's important to talk about what they saw, to maybe add some more context to what it is they saw, and help their understandings that way. Page 48 and 49, very important on the debriefing. Look for secondary sources. On page 50, they talk about secondary sources. Bring in additional books. Help children, by reading them, whatever it is they want to learn more about. You might find some sources on the internet that they can hear you read to them, or depending on grade they're in, obviously they might read it to themselves. Help them use their new knowledge and play by setting up enough equipment that they can do that. Such as the fire truck project. In that video you saw, they created their own fire truck and used it for play. And I think we're all done with chapters 3 and 4. These are really dense and filled with wonderful information. Let me go ahead and share my screen. For this week, you're going to come to learning modules, week 7. Okay. And it's investigations. For investigations, you also need to take photographs. If you do not have permission to photograph all the children, then make sure that you black out the ones that can't be photographed. But we need pictures of the children doing their investigations. And you need to consider what scientific processes are they using. Having fun and having a great time, that's not a scientific process. So when you label your pictures, because you're going to label each picture that's in phase 2 of your documentation panel, please don't say kids are having fun doing XYZ. The children may be observing XYZ. They might be hypothesizing about what XYZ means. They might be questioning. They might be experimenting to see XYZ. They might be measuring XYZ, counting, comparing, sorting, experimenting is on here twice. Well, good for me. Seriating, problem solving, or constructing. But those are all scientific processes. So please let me, the viewer, know what scientific processes the children were engaged in each photograph by having a typed label under each photograph. So your materials for investigations, obviously you're going to use real materials, not toys. And you're going, and no worksheets and no Play-Doh. We need inquiry tools. And cooking activities are not an investigation. They're a lot of fun, but they're not an investigation. So don't cook anything. Once the children have engaged in these investigations, obviously you're going to print your pictures and have your label, and you're going to add what content area you are addressing. Is it science? Is it social studies? Is it math? So I'm going to go ahead and come down here. You're going to have some representations of what children's new learning looked like. What if they had a unit on turtles? They may make their own turtle out of clay. They might draw whatever it is they had a unit on, or an inquiry project on. They might build, if they're doing a construction inquiry project, they might build their own apartment building with boxes. Make sure you take photographs or include the real representations for your documentation panel, because documentation panels is for the children to look at the end too, and see all of the wonderful work that they accomplished. Here you have more pictures. You've got drawings you could add. And at the bottom of the middle section, where your phase 2 is, you're going to have another narrative summary, just like phase 1 had a narrative summary, 1 page, single spaced. And you're going to include a clear explanation with real examples of children's investigations. What did they do to answer their 10 questions or more? What discoveries did they make? Be descriptive. What was their behavior like when they engaged in these investigations? What technology was used? What dispositions were fostered? Is it the disposition to be creative or to be an investigator, or any of the many, many, many more dispositions you'd like to foster in your classroom? So last week, we looked at what phase 1's documentation would look like on the left side. This week, we're going to look at phase 2. For phase 2, you're going to obviously label it phase 2. This is my worm project. And I'm going to start off with some pictures of the children. And then I'm going to have labels under the pictures that indicate the science processes or content area learning taking place. And then in here, I'm going to have just 2 or 3 examples of children's representations. Now, what some people do, totally up to you, is they put a pocket across here and then they just stick in whatever the children created. If it was pictures that they drew, they stick them in there. That's another option. You might just take, if children, like, say they created clay representations of a turtle, if they had a turtle unit, you might just take some photographs of those clay representations and put them here. And then down here on the table, you're going to, where you actually take a photograph of your finished documentation panel. For me, you might line up their clay turtles. And then down here is the narrative summary. And of course, you're going to keep your project journal up to date, as you go through. And this is going to take weeks and weeks. But once you finish documenting phase 1, just very gently take yourself into phase 2. This is no rush. I expect this to take many weeks. It's usually, 6 weeks or so to work your way through this process. So please don't be in a hurry. Be gentle with yourself and have a good time while you're doing it. Don't rush. So for this week, you're going to read chapters 3 and 4 in Hellman Katz. And you're going to do a planning investigations analysis. Let me take you to assignments, and we're just going to look at that briefly. Here it is. Okay. Based on the topic you discussed last week, what field sites might be available to your students? There may be none, so that's okay. You talk about that too. What about visiting experts? It's going to have to be one or the other. What artifacts could you bring in? What artifacts are just items related to the topic? What assistance might you expect from parents? What skills might you need to teach your students in order to prepare them for investigating? Charting, tallying, drawing representations, all important skills to have. What investigative experiences might you plan based on students' questions? And you may not have all of these questions yet. You may just be in the very beginning, but give me what you have so far. Where do you think this is going? What opportunities for representing what was learned might you offer? This is just a guess. No one's going to hold you to this, but what do you think you could use for them to represent what they're learning? We're throwing out ideas. This is a planning session. No one's going to hold. You may even have a completely different topic in the end. This is a planning on maybe, and this is what I could use, just to get ourselves used to thinking about doing inquiry. All right, any questions, please let me know, and I will set up a Zoom visit. I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.